Hi, I'm Carla Sands, and I'm the chair for the Foreign Policy Initiative at America First Policy Institute. I'm so happy to welcome today to our studio here at AFPI Adam Savit. He's the chair for the China Policy Initiative. And I just wanted to ask you, Adam, so President Trump and his trip to Asia, do you look at this as, is it national security, is it economic, is it strategy? How do you see this trip?
The answer is yes. The answer is all of the above, right? I mean, all of those are going to be on the table, and all of those are interrelated. But let's say the top thing he'll be discussing on this trip is economy, is trade, is tariffs. That's really what needs to be resolved on this trip. You know, there's been a tit-for-tat tariffs back and forth with China ever since Liberation Day back in April. Right. Different accelerations to the tariffs and other countermeasures. Of course, most recently, China put on rare earth export restrictions that affect not only the United States, the entire West, the entire world, our ability to produce military equipment, to produce other industrial equipment. So this is what really brought it to the fore, you know. And then President Trump threatened to put an extra 100% tariff on China as of December 1st. Now, I think as there have been some comments of Secretary of Treasury Bessent in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, during this ASEAN conference, that to some degree those have been diffused. So I think both the rare earth export controls and the 100% tariff are sort of put on the sidelines so far. And of course, the main event is going to be the expected meeting between President Xi and President Trump at the APEC summit. That is in Seoul, and that's going to come up at the end of this week. So there's a lot of speculation on the wheeling and dealing. Along with the tariffs, there's going to be the question of TikTok, the divestment of TikTok to an American company, and the terms of that, what that's going to look like. Fentanyl is definitely going to be on the table. Of course, the drug that's been poisoning tens of thousands of Americans, which China, I believe, has full control over the manufacture of, and I hope that the president calls them out on that. So, economics at the front, but economics plays into the security situation, the deterrence situation. So across the board, everything's going to be on the table.
It's so exciting to watch President Trump lead with, peace through strength, and this goes with economy through strength as well.
Sure.
And we've had so many American presidents on their back foot, and now we can see President Trump is actually leading on the China issue. But how do you think that his China visit, his China vision as well, overall, how does that fit in with his America First agenda?
Listen, the first thing to say is that, as was underlying during the Iran situation, if you remember over the summer when we bombed the Iran nuclear sites, there was some skepticism as to, okay, is this an America First foreign policy? This is a lot of international meddling. We're back in the Middle East. Remember, the president said, I decide what America First foreign policy. I decide what MAGA is. So, yes, this is America First foreign policy. President Trump, during his first administration, was the first to identify China as the main adversary and an economic rival. And that free trade with China was affecting our industry, was affecting our employment, was giving them a strategic leverage over us. And he put those first tariffs in under Ambassador Lighthizer, who was the U.S. trade representative. That is what the stake in the ground is for America First foreign policy. Now, it has been noted that in the second administration, to some degree, Trump has actually been a little bit more moderate, a little bit less hawkish than his cabinet members, such as Marco Rubio, who's a more traditional security hawk. But President Trump has his ear to the ground to make a compromise on the trade deal that will also help the American people while keeping a proper deterrence in what we call the first island chain, which is Japan, Philippines, Taiwan, and that's where we need to make our deterrent stand against Chinese incursions.
When you talk about the Chinese incursions, every day I see Chinese fishing boats and Chinese non-military vessels that have been tasked by the Chinese Communist Party to attack the fishing boats of other nations in their own territorial waters, whether it's Filipino boats in Filipino waters, and there goes the Chinese either causing their ship to sink, attacking them with water cannons, ramming them, killing people. It's shocking how many abuses the Chinese Communist Party is using their own people to perpetrate around the world and in their region.
Absolutely. You bring up something important, which is, you said sort of private boats or military or non-military. It's a very blurry area in China. So they have their Navy, they have their Coast Guard, they have their, patrol. They send those out, all out into the South China Sea, which is a disputed territory, of course. The Philippines, Vietnam, even Taiwan has sort of a claim, but China has its 9-dash line where it is claiming that entire basin of the South China Sea. And you're correct, they keep on testing those limits. They keep on sending their ships close to these Philippine patrol vessels. Sometimes they will crash into them. They crashed their own military ship into their own Coast Guard ship. That's how aggressive they're being. They made that mistake. So absolutely. They're also doing that in the Taiwan Strait as well. Aircraft, seacraft, they're testing that median line in the Taiwan Strait each and every day. Gray zone warfare is what they call it. They're stepping right up to the line of military conflict, but not crossing it. So they're not giving our allies the excuse to actually attack back. They're testing those boundaries, and yes, trying to grab more territory de facto in that way.
I do think they sometimes cross that line because they do go into Taiwanese airspace over and over again, and just like Russia does into NATO airspace from time to time.
Yes.
But I also watched over the years how Xi Jinping told Obama he wasn't going to militarize those South China Sea islands, and now they are basically aircraft carriers
Yes.
in the ocean.
Yes.
In territory that doesn't belong to China.
Yes.
And then many of us watched those trade deals over the decades be negotiated by American government employees with China, and our American companies lost every time. And that's really what hollowed out, I think, these cities across our country that were big manufacturing powerhouses. Just 3 decades ago, the number one income for most counties in the Northeast was manufacturing, and today it's healthcare, and healthcare is basically paid by you and me. It's taxpayers that fund that healthcare, and so our country has been going in a bad direction until President Trump jumped into the driver's seat thanks to the voters and have taken control. How do you think China sees this visit by President Trump to Asia? How do you think they read it, and what messages are they getting?
Well, it's very important because this, as has been noted, this is his first trip in this administration to Asia. There has been some critiques from the left and some on the right as well that he hasn't been engaged in Asia, and that's because Russia-Ukraine conflict has been taking up the headlines and also substantively the bandwidth of the administration and some of our military exports and this sort of thing. And then, of course, the Middle East, the conflict between Israel and the Gazans in the form of Hamas, and that bombing run, which was very limited and sort of like an incision and very precise and was very successful on their nuclear weapons. But people feel that may have distracted him. Now, I argue the fact that he was able to knock out and lance that boil of Iran in that one strike actually allows us to pivot and focus more on China. So I think that actually played into the Asia question. And I think also we've paid a good amount of attention that Secretary of War Hegseth gave a speech at Shangri-La. That is one of the stakes in the ground where we state our policy. There were some vague aspects to it. There wasn't a very clear policy on Taiwan, but there was a basic statement that China is the main troublemaker in the region, that we have to back up that first island chain that I mentioned. And so we have the basic stakes in the ground. Now, the person of Trump being there brings a whole new level of engagement, brings a whole new level of, I would say, deterrence seriousness. And, people attribute to President Trump a certain unpredictability. I think there is more predictability than some say, but let's say that everyone is checking their paces and figuring out how they're going to react to him, especially in a one-on-one, in that room deal situation where President Xi is there, mano a mano with him. So I think it reassures our allies. I think it puts the Chinese on notice that, here is the president. He is re-engaged in this space in his first year. He's back on the ground. He's making peace deals as he always does between Thailand and Cambodia. Now, many Americans may not have known there was a conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, but there was. This is important to have peace in Southeast Asia, economically and otherwise. And so he's bringing his presence and all that is into Asia.
That's terrific. I've even seen the videos of the Cambodian troops marching. They do kind of a very high-legged march, and how aggressive they are on their border between Thailand and Cambodia. It's been really interesting to see, and I'm so happy to see that he has negotiated this peace agreement between them. He is the peace president. There's no question.
He really is.
Yeah. How do you see, so President Trump is coming with, I would say, more economic cooperation in the Asian region, if you look at the different countries. How do you think China and the Chinese Communist Party specifically looks at this? And they look at the region as their region of influence and
Yes.
certainly want control. So
Yes.
tell us about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, that is the crucial battleground, that rim around China, right? That first island chain and Southeast Asia. That's where China likes to extend its economic influence, where its defense influence follows the economic influence. And that's where we need to have those, our allies locked in, because with those allies, there is no way that China can oppose us, really. The cornerstone of that is Japan, economically and defense-wise. Now, Japan has a new prime minister, that is Sanai Takaichi. She is of the right-wing strand of the ruling party. They have one big fat ruling party that has ruled for decades, but so they sort of have factions within that party. But she is sort of right-wing. She is echoing the populist call of Trump and of European populists as well. She has hit on immigration as a major issue. Now, relative to Europe and the United States, Japan has had little immigration, but it has been enough to sort of spark a backlash. She has also promised to spend more defense-wise, to move the defense spending from 1% to 2% in Japan. And also, Japan has been acquiring meaningful weapons systems that can oppose China. Standoff missiles, we call them. They bought our own Tomahawks, and they bought other ground-to-air, ground-to-ground missiles that make a meaningful contribution to defense. On the other side, we need to build up those economic and trade relationships with those countries. Okay, with Japan and Korea, there was a lot of controversy with their trade agreements. It did ruffle a lot of feathers. They're used to having unimpeded access to our markets. Yeah. President Trump says even allies need to pay their fair share, need to come meet us halfway on these trade questions. So the two big questions with Japan and Korea, and this is going to be decisive in our economic relationships in Asia, is these inbound investments. So Japan has agreed to $550 billion, and South Korea has agreed to $350 billion in inbound investment. That means investing in American companies, rather in American enterprises. Now, both of them have done that already so far, things like car and auto battery plants and this sort of thing. We want the South Koreans to be involved in shipbuilding, commercial as well as military, here in the United States. They already have a shipyard operating under their company Hanwha in Philadelphia Shipyard. We need to expand that out to rev up our military production. So that's a way that the economic and the military overlaps and builds and reinforces our alliances.
Would you say that what you're just talking about with South Korea and Japan being two great economic partners and I would say good allies, are those wins that President Trump is delivering to the American people? They
are, and let's say it's in phases, because here's the first thing. The first thing over the summer, those big Asian economies were hanging out there. We didn't know what those trade deals would look like. We didn't know if we'd get a trade deal. And Japan's came first. And again, there were measures as far as tariffs on their auto sector, which is their huge export. There were some agricultural deals going on. But again, the big thing was that inbound investment that President Trump wants to offset the trade imbalance, the inbound investment from those countries into the United States. Japan made its deal. And then 2 weeks later, Korea made its deal along very similar lines. They sort of compete, and also there are allies, but they also compete together. We're in a defense relationship called the Trilateral, which is the U.S., Japan, and South Korea. So that's an important glue that is holding those together as well. To outline, now we spoke about the Japanese PM. New PM is right of center. The new Korean president is left of center. Okay, there's concerns about him getting a little too buddy-buddy with China. There's concerns about him being a little too friendly to the North Koreans. But thus far, he has acted in a moderate way. And thus far, his first foreign policy stop was in Japan. They have a historical grievance. Japan occupied Korea for many decades, but if we stay in this trilateral agreement with U.S., Japan, Korea, that is a really strong triangle there that can oppose what some people are calling the Northern Triangle, which is China, Russia, North Korea.
So interesting. Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see whether President Trump meets with the head of North Korea, Kim Jong-un.
The latest noises I've been hearing is no, but you just never know.
You never know. President Trump, right?
That's right.
But what about President Trump's trip regarding the Indo-Pacific. So do you see any basing or military cooperation, military production regarding the region in the Indo-Pacific?
So the basing and the production are absolutely crucial because we are many thousands of miles away from the China threat. We are across the entire Pacific Ocean, so we need forward staging bases. Now for decades, really since World War II and the Korean War, we have had major air and naval bases in Japan as well as South Korea. There are still some controversies there, especially in Korea, about who pays for the basing and what sort of rights they have, and whether those U.S. Forces Korea troops will be dedicated to a Korea Peninsula war, or whether they'll be also potentially resourced to a Taiwan war. So that is a sensitivity there. Japan has pretty much reconciled itself with our basing and the fact that Japan is increasing its overall spending. I think the United States and Japan will be simpatico on that. Philippines, new stuff happening. New stuff and old stuff, all right? Because we had something called the Subic Bay Naval Base. This was back in the Cold War. Major naval base. I think it was the biggest one outside of Europe. That closed down in the 90s when we thought the Cold War was over. We're not going to need a base there. We're going to need a base there again. That's going to be opening up. And there's going to be co-production facilities with a South Korean naval shipyard for repairs of U.S. ships. That's very important. Also in the north of the Philippines, we are going to be leasing or having basing rights in those Philippine islands up there, which directly abut Taiwan from the south. So that's also crucial. And of course, we have our own islands there. Guam is the most prominent with the most amount of bases. So, and on the side of co-production, Japan has already started co-production. They've already started to, they backfilled our Patriot missiles, which we sent to Ukraine. You know, we are very stretched thin. And unfortunately, we also can't really supply Taiwan. They have actually purchased our military equipment that goes to Taiwan is not aid. They purchase it. And unfortunately, we're behind on it because our own military industrial abilities are not there. So if we can do co-production in the theater with our Asian allies, that would also help to fill that gap.
How far are we behind in delivering the military equipment that Taiwan ordered?
In dollar terms, I
No.
believe well, you can gauge it in dollar terms because we're 18 or 19 billion dollars of equipment behind. I think it's sort of like a rolling delivery. So I don't know when the first one that we're behind on was. It goes back to the first Trump administration. Okay, these sales and these promised deliveries. So we're talking at least 4 years.
So our U.S. domestic production, our military companies
Yes.
that make our equipment and the equipment for our allies are
Yes.
years behind their orders?
That is correct. And that is the industrial capacity. I think some of that is red tape. It's hard to say. And we at AFPI support arming Taiwan like a hedgehog, they say. It can never be as big or powerful as Taiwan, rather than China. But we want China's missiles to be bouncing off them. We want them to be a sticky porcupine that stops them from invading. I might mention too, this industrial capacity problem goes to our relationship with Australia, which is very important in the region. And AUKUS is an agreement with U.S., Australia, and the United Kingdom. Yeah. And a big part of that is building nuclear-powered submarines for Australia. But we currently can't even churn out enough for our own needs, let alone to supply Australia. This is a huge problem domestically and internationally.
And President Trump is the anti-red tape president.
Sure.
So the thought that between his first term, 4 years, and now this term, we're almost a year in,
Yeah.
the fact that we still aren't meeting our production demands,
Yeah.
I don't know what that says about, first, the defense companies,
Sure.
how they're doing things,
Sure.
and then the fact that maybe the production way that they do it is maybe not keeping up with modern times, or they don't have the labor that they need. But certainly this is something that outside needs to be solved, right? The Department of War is not going to be able to solve this. This is
Yes.
outside companies.
Yes.
So this is a really big deal that needs to be looked at
Yes.
by the defense industry.
This goes to all levels of policy, and that's why it's incredibly complex. Because as you point out, it also goes to workforce training, especially with the ships. We haven't built ships in decades. Since the Reagan administration had a very large navy, so we don't have the technicians. We don't have the engineers. We don't have people trained on let alone the facilities. And that's why we do need to leverage and rely on our allies. China is 50% of the shipbuilding in the world. The rest of it is pretty much Japan and South Korea. Thankfully, those are our allies. We need to have them investing, and South Korea already is. Part of that $350 billion deal is $100 million in shipbuilding.
Yeah, I think it's even $150 billion.
Okay, there you go.
But I have to say that our shipbuilding in the United States, we are making ships, but we're making them really slowly, more like the 1990s. Korea and South Korea and Japan are making them in a more modern way, but China doesn't have labor unions. They have really low wages.
Yes.
They do produce in a modern way, modern factory way, but they also don't have like the hurdles that the Western nations or even like Korea or South Korea or Japan have. So I think this is an issue that has to be dealt with. And urgently, like there should be a battle rhythm to this.
See, this is important, and this is like a philosophical point, not to geek out too much, but it's a question of the top-down dictatorial control that gives you some advantages. That lets you juice up certain sectors. That lets you overproduce and sell not at a profit. That's how they got the rare earths to begin with. They sank so much into that industry, and they consolidated the processing in China. It didn't matter if it was profitable or not. They don't care if their companies make money. They were able to just invest it. Same with the electric auto industry.
Right.
They sank so much money into that. Now, thankfully, we have tariffs on that, and we're not getting those EVs. But Europe is being flooded.
Europe is, and it's going to kill their car industry if they don't do something right away. There are so many BYD cars on the road, and so many shops that are selling them that I saw personally.
Yeah.
How do you see a difference between President Trump's administration and President Biden's administration dealing with the China threat in that region?
Mm-hmm. There is a difference. Now, let's be friendly and say that on many things, President Biden was sort of on autopilot. But one thing where he sort of stepped out of the line in a bad way is that 4 times he said that he would defend Taiwan. Okay. Now, those of us who like Taiwan, that sounds like a good thing. We would like to defend Taiwan, but the president can't say that. He's not supposed to say that. Under the Taiwan Relations Act and under the policy of strategic ambiguity, we don't say that we defend Taiwan, and that's why his staff, White House staff, had to walk that back each and every time. People portrayed him as more hawkish in the region, and especially on Taiwan. But I think the credibility gap was huge. I think President Trump is the king of strategic ambiguity in Taiwan and elsewhere, and that policy fits him perfectly. And I think she is much more concerned about what Trump will do regarding Taiwan with all the potential waffling than Biden. And as far as deterrence overall, Biden administration was a disaster. We have to remind people about the Afghanistan pullout. Okay, that destroyed our credibility for the whole rest of his administration. It left our NATO allies in the cold, and that got. I argue that sparked the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
I think it's one of the 3 points that Putin looked at as sort of puzzle pieces he needed.
And it made she happy.
Right?
The Afghanistan pullout.
Yeah.
So.
What a disaster.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that no one resigned over that. No one in the administration was so shocking to me when it was so disgraceful what happened. Tell me about the idea of President Trump reshoring manufacturing in the United States and certainly countering sort of China's attempt to gobble up, it seems like, the world's manufacturing. Mm-hmm. How do you see that?
It's an uphill struggle. Listen, I mean, and I'm no expert on this aspect of it, but those who look at it closely say, yes, China ate our lunch. A lot of it was outsourced, but there's other dynamics going on, like automation now, like AI. It's going to be hard to completely reindustrialize, and also we are used to a certain standard of living. So let's bring into it the nearshoring. Let's bring into it the friendshoring. This administration, we haven't seen the national defense strategy yet, but it's potentially, it's hopefully going to come out soon. But the whispers are that it's very America's focused. Okay, it's very regional focused. Now we have all levels of economies in South America and Central America that can take parts of that supply and value chain and will at least be in a safe zone. Now, as far as auto manufacturing and those heavier industries. That's also a big question of our Asian allies like Japan and South Korea going to be willing to outsource all that manufacturing to the United States? Because they do want to help us. I believe they do. Yeah. But that's part of what gives them power and them leverage. So we're going to have to see not only the auto industry, but for countries like Taiwan and South Korea, the semiconductor industry. Okay, they're building hundreds of billions of dollars worth of fabs here, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. But even their technicians are trained. Our technicians are not quite trained yet, so it doesn't lead directly to American jobs quite yet. It's a very, very complex web.
Right, as is manufacturing, right? It's not going to look like it did when I was a kid, and it's not going to look like it did like in the 90s where people were on an assembly line. It's mostly machines, and it's people with highly skilled that are going to tell those machines what to do.
Yes.
So certainly manufacturing today is different.
And it'll be different too. It'll be as people are highlighting the data centers and the energy that powers those data centers. That's going to be the growth industry. What does the average person's employment look like in that? I'm not sure. We have to ask the expert. But yeah, it'd be like technicians for robotics, technicians for an energy plant. That's what it's going to look like.
So, President Trump leads with peace through strength. Now that North Korea is back in the headlines, what do you think about North Korea, the U.S., and President Trump's vision?
So it's very interesting. As you flagged, there are some rumors about President Trump meeting with Kim, and of course in his first administration there were some bold moves, including being there at the demilitarized zone and walking across it. Those are some amazing images. Mm-hmm. Things have changed. At this moment, North Korea is rather energized because they have this relationship with Russia because of the Ukraine war, and they have given thousands of troops to the front line in Ukraine. In return, they've gotten technology. Russia is helping them build ships. Russia is giving them potentially missile technology. I've talked to Korean analysts who say that North Korea has never felt so emboldened and empowered. Weirdly, it's actually leaving China sort of out of the picture. Now North Korea and Russia are the buddy-buddy, and Putin's giving them strategic depth. North Korea has actually said that they don't care anymore. Officially, it's not their policy anymore to reunify with the South. That's how much they're dismissing this. They're saying, you know what, leave this to another time. We're having our own time here. I don't think those kind of meetings are in the near future. At the same time, as I mentioned, there is a left of center president in South Korea who generally is keeping the peace there, or just not wanting to rock the boat. So I think in the meantime, we need to keep our deterrent. We need to have our forward bases in Korea and Japan, which we do. We need to have good relationships with those countries and just stay the course with our deterrent.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you think the American people should know about the security and the economic relationship that we have with Asia? Mm-hmm. What should they know that they don't know?
Zooming out, the big thing they need to know is the importance. I know, especially on the MAGA side of things, there is skepticism for good reason of international entanglements. But when we're talking about Asia, when we're talking about the Taiwan Straits, when we're talking about the South China Sea, we're talking about the biggest concentration of people, economy, trade. Doesn't matter if we like it or not, that's going to be the center of gravity for the next decades of trade and economy. So we need to be engaged. I argue, the semiconductors on Taiwan are very important, but the most important thing is the trade lanes. The most important thing is the energy coming from the Middle East. Now we can talk about, I hope that there's this pipeline coming in Alaska of natural gas. I hope we give more natural gas, but for right now, East Asia depends on fossil fuels coming from the Middle East, and if that supply was cut off by China, there would be a global depression because Japan and Korea would be starved out. On that alone, we need to be concerned about Asia. And once China starts pushing into the Pacific, which conquering Taiwan would allow it to do, it would push our line of defense back to the second island chain, that's Guam. Once they infringe on that, we're back to Hawaii and San Diego. And that's not a paranoid thought because China's Navy is getting huge. So, number one, it's the center of commerce. It's important. And number two, this perimeter is going to keep on moving towards us, unfortunately.
Right, very aggressive Navy, huge
Yeah.
Navy, much bigger than ours, and we have the smallest Navy now that we've had since World War One.
Correct.
Adam Savit, it has been wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
You are so informative about this very important subject of our relationship with Asia and also with China and the Chinese Communist Party. Thank you so much for joining us.
So great to see you.
Great to be with you. Thanks.